Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books that nobody talks about. I do have to put a little caveat on it when I say that nobody talks about. I'm talking about the little corner of the internet that I inhabit. I very rarely or never hear people talking about these books, so when I say no one, that's what I mean. Maybe you've heard people talk about these books, and that would make me so happy if you have, because obviously the point of this video is that I want more people talking about these books. So yeah, these are my top 10 books that I feel like nobody's reading, nobody's talking about, and we need to change that. First on my list is Esc&Ctrl by Steve Hollyman. I read this at the beginning of this year and I loved this book. It was so freaking good. To be honest with you, this was strictly a cover buy. I mean, look at this cover. This pink is perfection. I love the graphic design of the keyboard keys. And once you read the story, you understand why this is the cover. But the reason that I love this book so much is that it gives heavy House of Leaves vibes, which if you know me, you know that House of Leaves is one of my favorite books of all time. And I've been chasing the high of House of Leaves forever. And while this story is really different than House of Leaves, it gives that vibe and that atmosphere that House of Leaves gives you, but it also gives you the story within a story and like annotations within the pages, which is that really fun element of House of Leaves that makes it so much fun. Now, obviously this is a lot shorter than House of Leaves, so if you've been thinking about House of Leaves and you've been a little bit intimidated by how long it is, I think it's like 600 pages or something. If you want to test out the atmosphere and the story within a story, the annotations and all that, I would recommend trying Esc&Ctrl to see if that's something that you like, and then jumping into House of Leaves. Basically, this story follows our main character Vincent, who wakes up in New York City and has no idea how he got there. And as he gains back his memories, he remembers that his girlfriend was very recently murdered back in the UK. And as he continues to piece back his memories, he's thinking to himself, well, I probably came to New York to find the killer of my girlfriend, right? That's probably why I'm here. And like I said before, there is a story within a story element to this and lots of annotations from one of the storylines, and it's just really, really fun, and I love this. I would definitely recommend it. More people need to be reading this and talking about it because it's excellent. Next on my list is Animal by Lisa Taddeo. If you've been around my channel before, you know that I love a story with an unlikable main character and female rage, and this is like the epitome of female rage and unlikable characters. This follows a woman who lives in New York City, but she decides to leave one day and move to California because she's had some really traumatic events happen to her in New York City. And when she goes to California, we know that she's looking for someone, but we don't know who that someone is or why she's looking for them. And while she's looking for this person in California, she's dealing with all of the traumatic things that she's experienced in her childhood and back in New York City, and how those traumatic things that she's experienced are affecting her today. But like I said, a huge theme of this story is female rage. She's very rageful, and I'm sure a lot of people would think that she's an extremely unlikable main character, but I loved reading about her because of that. So if themes of grief and depression and trauma are something that you enjoy reading about, I mean, that sounds really dark, but if that's something that you enjoy reading about, I would definitely recommend this, especially if you like unlikable main characters. The next book that more people need to be reading and talking about is Madam by Phoebe Wynne. First of all, let's appreciate this cover. This is one of my favorite book covers of all time. It's incredible. This is basically a gothic boarding school story with heavy influences of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and also just like a touch of Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Basically, we're following this main character who has just recently been hired to be the new classics teacher at this very prestigious all-girls boarding school. And as the school year progresses, things start to get more and more sinister. She starts questioning what happened to the teacher that was teaching before her in her position. And she can tell that the students are holding back secrets from her, but she doesn't know why. And some really mysterious things are happening among some of the students. And like I said, it's just a really gothic story. And while the story is very different than Rebecca, like obviously this takes place at a school. I mean, obviously Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier doesn't take place at a school, but the overlooming sense of someone's presence like that exists in Rebecca, you feel that in this story. And there's even some like Easter eggs to fans of Rebecca throughout this story, which I loved. So if you like gothic stories, if you like boarding school stories, I would definitely recommend this. The next underrated book that more people need to be talking about is Exciting Times by Naoise Dolan. Now obviously Naoise Dolan is very different than Sally Rooney, but like the easiest way to just give you like a little hook to this story is that it's like very smart, cutting wit writing Sally Rooney. Basically. Like, I love Sally Rooney, don't get me wrong, but I found Naoise Dolan's writing way more, like, cuttingly smart and witty and very funny, but it's still like the vibes of like a 20-something-year-old trying to figure out what she's doing in her life. And also the main character is Irish because Naoise Dolan is also Irish, just like Sally Rooney. So even though they are very different, Naoise Dolan and Sally Rooney, it's like the easiest way to pitch it to you, basically. So this story follows Ava, who, like I said, is a 20-something-year-old who has just recently moved to Hong Kong to be an English teacher. And in Hong Kong, she meets Julian, who is a British banker, and the two get really close, and Julian starts to kind of open up Ava to his lavish lifestyle, because obviously Ava, as a teacher, she doesn't make very much money, but Julian, he's a banker and he makes a crap ton of money, and he kind of brings Ava into the lap of luxury, and Ava becomes more and more attached to Julian, but Julian really keeps his distance from her. And so Ava's really struggling, like, do I stay in this lap of luxury even though he clearly doesn't feel the same way I feel about him? And one day Julian goes on a business trip, and this is when Ava meets Edith, a lawyer in Hong Kong. And so Ava has to decide, is she going to stay in the lap of luxury in a comfortable life even though Julian isn't really emotionally attached to her like she is to him, or does she want to take a leap of faith and be with Edith? Now, all of that kind of makes it sound like it's a romance novel. It's not a romance novel, but it's very like slice of life of a 20-something-year-old trying to make their way in the world and figure out what they want to do with their future. But all the while, the writing is extremely smart, extremely witty, very, very funny, and more people need to be reading it. Next on my list of underrated books is a modern classic, and so I guess if it's a modern classic, maybe it's not technically underrated, but I never hear people talking about this book, and people need to be reading about it, talking about it, because I know that so many people would love this book. So what is the book? It's The Collector by John Fowles. And basically, here's the pitch. If you like You by Caroline Kepnes, you need to read The Collector by John Fowles. This is like the prototype for You by Caroline Kepnes, okay? This was published in 1963, so seriously, this is the original You. I don't think I need to say anything more than that, but I will give you a little bit of taste about what the plot actually is. Basically, it follows our main character, Frederick, who is a butterfly collector, hence the title and the cover, he's a butterfly collector. And one day he comes across this really beautiful young art student, Miranda, and he decides that he wants to collect her like he collects butterflies. And you can kind of see where this is going. This is not a spoiler, it's at the beginning of the book. It's like the whole purpose of the book is that he abducts her and closes her up in his house and tries to force her to be with him, basically. So if you've read or seen You, you can see the connection already. I would highly recommend this, especially if you want to get into classics. I mean, technically it's like a modern classic, because like I said, it was published in 1963, but I mean, it's a great step into reading classics. If you are a big thriller reader, this is a great first step into reading classics, especially if you like You by Caroline Kepnes. And I know that that book and that show is so beloved, and why are more people not reading this? So many people would love this book, but nobody's reading it. Nobody's talking about it. Let's change that. Next on my list of underrated books is Stillborn by Guadelupe Nettel. Guadelupe Nettel is from Mexico, so this is a translated work from the Spanish. And if you follow the International Booker, let me stop you right there. Before you say anything, before you start typing, you might be saying to yourself, Kari, Stillborn was shortlisted for the International Booker this year. That's not underrated. Yes, I get it. It was shortlisted for the International Booker this year, and obviously it got lots of attention because of that. But I've only heard the booktubers who follow the International Booker talk about this book. No one outside of our little International Booker bubble is talking about this book, and that's such a shame because it's such a beautiful book and more people need to be reading it outside of our little International Booker bubble. So what is this book even about? Well, it follows two friends, Alina and Laura, and they're best friends. And during college, they make a pact to each other that neither one of them are ever going to have children. But then once they get older, Laura gets married and decides that she wants to have a family with her husband. So Alina feels a little bit deceived by Laura's decision, but she doesn't tell Laura that. She really just keeps that for herself. But she starts to feel the distance between her and her best friend because of this decision. This book does have some very heavy themes, as you could probably tell from the title, although it's interesting to talk about the title after you read the book. But my point is, just be warned, if you need to check out any content warnings, I would recommend that you do that if you could be sensitive to anything about children. But this book really examines the different ways to be a mother and mother figures and choices that women have to make in their lives. I'm really trying not to say too much because, oh, also I wanted to say, if you're interested in this book, do not go on Goodreads and read the summary. And don't read the summary on the back of the book, okay? Do not read any summary. Just go off what I'm telling you, okay? Don't read anything else because the blurb spoils something so big about the story and like it hits so much harder when you read it if you don't know it's coming. I don't understand like who wrote that blurb and put such a huge spoiler in, like I don't understand. So if you're interested in this book in the slightest, do not read any summaries, blurbs about it. Just go in blind, and I think you would enjoy it a lot more. However, like I said, if it's possible you need to check the content warnings, I would recommend that you do that first. So anyway, even though this was really big in the international booker bubble this year, people outside the bubble need to be reading this because this is such an incredible, beautiful book. Next on my list of underrated books that more people need to be reading is In the Miso Soup by Ryo Murakami. This is a really dark, weird story, and it follows Kenji, who is a nightlife guide in Tokyo. And the story starts when he's hired by this American named Frank. And so Frank has hired Kenji to take him around the nightlife, to show him the different, like, darker, seedier sides of Tokyo nightlife, if you catch my drift, because that's what Kenji's job is. He just gets hired by these tourists, and based on what the tourist wants to do, Kenji will show them the best place to go enjoy themselves. But this story follows Kenji and Frank as Frank's desires start to get weirder and weirder, darker and darker, and Kenji starts to wonder, is Frank going to ruin my life? If you like dark, weird, creepy, unsettling stories, this is the book for you. It's so good. Next on my list of books that more people need to be reading and talking about is Vladimir by Julia May Jonas. And yes, if you've spent any amount of time on my channel, you'll know that I personally don't shut up about this book, but I will not rest until more people are reading and talking about this book, okay? So in case you need a little refresher of what this book is about, it follows our unnamed older female protagonist who is a professor at a liberal arts college, and so is her husband. Her husband is also a professor at this exact same liberal arts college, and kind of the background plot of the story is the fact that her husband has been accused by multiple students for sexual assault, and so that's kind of always running in the background of our protagonist's story and progression. But like the main storyline, obviously it follows a man named Vladimir, who is a new professor at this exact same liberal arts college. But Vladimir is quite a few years younger than our main character, because I forget exactly how old she is. I want to say she's in like her late 50s maybe, or early 60s, I think. But Vladimir, he's quite younger than that. I think he was like in his late 30s or early 40s or something like that. But our main character becomes fascinated, almost obsessed with Vladimir. And we start to see what this fascination, this obsession starts to do to her. Also, the writing in this is just amazing. And more people need to be reading it, and more people need to be screaming into the void, like me, about how good this book is. The next book that more people need to be talking about is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is actually a nonfiction memoir graphic novel, and it's about the author Marjane Satrapi and her family during the Islamic Revolution while they were living in Tehran. And as someone who never learned about the Islamic Revolution in school, this was extremely educational. So just that alone, just the fact that it was so educational, made this an excellent book. But also her storytelling capabilities are insane. Like, I was captivated by this story. I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. So it's a really interesting read because it's not only educational, but also really captivating, as it tells the story of Marjane and her family, like I said, as they were living through the Islamic Revolution, and of Marjane being sent to France, where she still lives today, because her parents wanted to send her somewhere that she was going to be safe. So this was just a really good book. And also, I just have to say, if you've been interested in getting into graphic novels, I would highly recommend for this to be your first graphic novel. Personally, it was my first graphic novel ever, and I loved it, and it just like catapulted me into the world of graphic novels, and I haven't stopped since. Like, this is such a good place to start if you've been interested in graphic novels. And kind of like Vladimir by Julia May Jonas, that, like I said, I don't shut up about, but nobody else is talking about this book, the same could be said for this next book, You Deserve Nothing by Alexander Maxick. I don't shut up about this book, but no one else is talking about it. More people need to be reading it and talking about it. But just in case you've never heard me talk about this one, this book is in 3 perspectives, and all 3 of the perspectives are people at this international high school in Paris. The first perspective is Will, who's a really beloved, well-respected teacher at this high school. Everybody loves him. The students love him. His colleagues love him. Like, he's super well-respected, and all the students want to be in his class. And then the second perspective is a male student in Will's class, and we see from Gilad's perspective just how much the students love him and respect him. And we learn through Gilad's point of view that a lot of the students do like really good things in their life. Like, they make a point to go do good with their lives just to make Will proud of them. So we can see through Will's influence, these students are becoming better people because they want to impress him. So we see the good of Will's influence. But then the third perspective is from a female student who isn't a student of Will, but she is a student at this same school. And through her perspective, this isn't a spoiler, this is like the crux of the book, that this student and Will are having a huge air quotes here, having a relationship. So this story is just a super interesting character study of how people are not always what you think they are. Because like I said, Will, he's so respected, his colleagues, his students, like he's so well loved and respected. But behind the scenes, he's doing this terrible, awful, dark thing that nobody knows about. So it's just really interesting to see this character study. However, as always, when I mention this book, I do have to put a little caveat on it because this book is kind of controversial because of the author and the story and everything. I'll link the video down below where I go into more detail about what this controversy is. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. But this is just a super interesting character study that I wish more people were talking about. All right, so these are my favorite books that nobody is talking about, and more people need to be reading them and talking about them. So please let me know in the comments if you've ever read any of these books and what did you think. 2, if you're interested in reading any of them now that you've heard a little bit about them, definitely let me know. I would love to talk with you about them. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. It really helps my channel. It's an easy way to support my channel. And subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to have you back, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye.